Okay, so let's begin by looking at the role of karma with regards to the soul. So, in a way, how does karma affect the potentiality of the soul? I mean, in the sense, yesterday we looked at certain analogies, right? What were some of them? We spoke about the clouds covering the sun. Okay, about that muddy water also. So, in a way, we see that. So, karma is, as we said, it is a form of subtle material particles or subtle matter that attaches to the soul as a result of one's actions. And as a result of it, the soul is not able to achieve its full potential, as we have seen yesterday. Now, we see that the presence of karma acts as a kind of a veil over the soul. So, have you seen a veil? Okay, so how does a veil look like? It is a kind of a netted thing. A better example would be, all of us have netlons for our windows, right? Okay, so when you look from the netlon, okay, and you look without the netlon, is there a difference? What is the difference? The clarity. So similarly, we can speak of karma as a kind of that veil. Okay, so which obstructs the infinite consciousness, happiness and power. So it is said that the more a soul accumulates karma, the more its powers are restricted. Okay, so as we saw yesterday, you take and put 1 spoon of mud in a glass of water, you will see the color slightly changes. You put 2 spoons, it again becomes more muddier. You keep on adding and it becomes more and more muddier till it becomes completely brown. So in this way, same goes with the principle of karma as well. Now, how can we remove this karma that leads to the cycle of birth, death and rebirth? Okay, so yesterday, as we said, we follow the path of right conduct, right knowledge and right faith. When we speak about right faith, faith in what are we talking about? Faith in what? When we say about right faith, okay, faith in the teachings. Okay, that means I have trust that whatever the scriptures are there, whatever teachings that have been given to me are giving me proper knowledge. Okay, and right knowledge, what would it mean? Knowledge about reality. That means understanding why things happen, understanding the role of karma, understanding the nature of your soul, understanding the potentiality of your soul. And we see that it will lead to right conduct. For example, when you know that your finger will get burnt when you put it in the fire, you will avoid doing that. Similarly, we see that right knowledge leads to right conduct. In a way, we see that faith is kind of a foundation for right knowledge and right conduct. And we see that practices like meditation, and asceticism, these can help to remove karma or lessen it. So you purify yourself, you purify your soul through these practices and also through ethical living, which then helps in order to shed karma or remove karma. And we see that as the soul begins to shed its karma, then it regains its natural perfections. So yesterday we spoke about the example of the snake, right? So initially we see that suppose if the snake has a bright color, as it ages, it needs to shed its skin. So when it is shedding its skin, we see that you can't see the proper color. Once it has fully shed, then once again the original color, the original beauty is seen. Same thing happens with karma. Now, the ultimate goal is to free the soul from samsara, that is the cycle of birth, death and rebirth. An ultimate goal is to get liberation or moksha. And therefore, it allows the soul to reach its full potentialities of infinite consciousness, power and happiness. In other words, we may say that the limitations for the soul which we may identify are due to the material body with which the soul has identified itself. Okay, so the karma of the past life of the person as well as the present activities. Okay, so the thought, speech, actions, etc. All this generates some amount of karma, some amount of cravings. And those cravings attach to the soul as particles. And therefore we see that the Jaina writers speak about this bondage and we will see that there are two kinds of bondage which they refer to. Okay, you have the internal bondage and you have the material bondage. Okay, and bondage in a way refers to how the soul is trapped, how it gets influenced by karma and how it affects its purity and freedom. So you have two types of bondages. So the first is within. Within the soul, and this happens due to our negative thoughts, desires and emotions. So in other words, we can say that how the purity of the soul is affected by its own actions. Okay, by its own dispositions, by its own thoughts, by its own intentions. So an example here could be about hatred or anger. Now just imagine for yourselves or just recollect, when you all get angry at somebody, what happens within you? Just take a moment, think of it. When you get angry at somebody or when you get offended, okay, what happens within you? What is the, okay, ego is hurt. Anything else? Yeah. Okay, body temperature rises. Anything, something what you all get, how do you all get affected in that way? What happens to the body that, kind of ruins your day or something in that way? Okay, mood changes. Headache, anybody gets? Okay, at least when I get angry, I get a headache. Okay, so in a way, the basic part, okay, some say temperature rises, your mood gets affected, etc. Mind gets clouded, okay. Now, all this happens why? Because we see that there is some kind of a negative energy, okay, which is generated within the soul. Okay, and this negative energy, so we speak about vibes, right? Okay, so when you're with somebody, you get a positive vibe. When you're with somebody, you feel a little bit different. This is exactly like that. So, when you have this hatred, anger, or even envy, for example, it creates this negative energy from within, and this negative energy disturbs the natural peace and purity of the soul. Similarly, if you are greedy, okay, supposing your friend has got a very good car, okay, and you're jealous about that, what happens is you constantly begin thinking about the same thing, and your peace of mind gets affected. You become restless, you become unsatisfied, and you do not value what you have. So similarly, we see that whatever happens within does have an effect on the soul. Next is the material bondage. So this involves the actual attachment to karma. So it is how the karmic particles interact with the soul and influence its conditions. So let's take an example. So we have good deeds versus bad deeds. So we see that when a person does something good or bad, they tend to attract karmic particles towards the souls. So good deeds will lead to positive and bad deed leads to negative. Now, for example, if a person tells lies or if a person does something that is unjust or involves in some harmful behaviors, that attracts negative particles which create further obstacles. Okay, similarly, positive karma leads to better circumstances or better situations in the future. So we see that an example for internal bondage could be, you take a glass of water and what you do here is you drop a few drops of ink. What happens to the water? Okay, the water becomes the color of the ink, right? You drop blue, it will become blue. You drop red, it becomes red. So what happens we see is the whole water begins to change its color. Why? Because there is something that dissolves within the water. When you look at material bondage, this could be like, as we look at the example of pouring some kind of mud in a glass of water. So even though the water becomes a bit muddier, you see there are sediments that get settled. Okay, so this is basically the difference between the internal and the material bondage. Now what we are going to do is, there are 3 questions related to the concept of God and the concept of soul. We'll reflect on that and we'll try to come up with a certain answer. What is the definition of Godhood in Jainism and how does it differ from the concept of Creator God? Okay, so this is the first question. Reflect on it for some time. So first try to understand, as we dealt with, what is Godhood in Jainism and how is it different from Creator God. Okay, shall we begin answering this? So first and foremost, what is the definition of Godhood? Okay, in a way, liberated soul, then anything else? Free from karma. Okay, any liberated soul can become God. Okay, to make things easier, let us look at this concept of Creator God. So what do we understand by Creator God? Okay, so in a way you have all powerful who creates everything. So that means before that there is nothing, he brings everything into existence. Now in such a concept of God, what happens to the whole aspect of salvation? Or let's take a look at worship. Okay, let's take a look at the worship or rituals. Here, why do we worship?
Salvation comes from God.
Okay, so we worship because of, in a way, salvation, also mercy and forgiveness. Now here, when we speak about the Jain definition of Godhood, we see that it is dependent on the individual. And here, are there rituals in Jainism? Do they worship anything? So there are no rituals. Are there any religious practices in Jainism? Yes, if you say, can you elaborate? Okay, ancestors who have enlightened. Anything else? Okay. Why do you pray to those ancestors? Or why do you pray to those? Exactly. Okay, so here the rituals or the worship is for guidance as well as inspiration. And therefore, Godhood here is a state of perfect purity and enlightenment. And how can this be achieved? How can purity or how can a soul become liberated and attain Godhood? Okay, self-realization is one thing. Anything else? Does it have to follow certain things? What is it?
Make sure that person does only good deeds.
Good deeds, then it has to follow the principles, okay, teachings. Okay, what we said about right, faith, knowledge and conduct. Okay, so therefore this whole concept of Godhood will ultimately come to meditating and seeking inspiration from the teachers or from those liberated souls who have gone earlier. Is this clear? Anything else do we want to add to this?
So it's not really self-realization in that sense.
In what sense? Like?
In the sense of asking for guidance, you're not really doing yourself.
In a sense, when we speak about that, you are trying to, it's like your need, right?
See, because in our Christianity, there's basically you do what provide.
Yeah.
So in this case, it is they do with the guidance of somebody else. You cannot say that you are doing it yourself.
No, but you're not, in a way, you're following the guidance of somebody else, but ultimately it is you who are this thing. Like, na? It's, for example, if you're
If it was the sole person doing it, then the guidance would be irrelevant. If it is only that person doing it.
maybe we can look at it in this way. You have an animal that is thirsty and you have the lake. Okay, so showing the direction of the lake is one thing, and then taking it and forcefully feeding it is something else. So in this way, when we speak about self-realization, is that the animal takes steps to go over there, and so the material is there, the guidance is there, but then ultimately it is the person who has to take the initiative. So in that way, it is a kind of a step by the person, something that is required, an initiative by the person that is required. As you said rightly, self-realization would mean that the person himself gets everything. So in that sense, it's not self-realization per se, in that sense of the term. But when you look at the whole, so the teachings are there, initiative is there, you need to engage yourself into that. Okay. Now, next is something to do with karma. So how do karma karmas obstruct the natural perfections of the soul? And what are the two kinds of bondage that are described in Jain philosophy? Okay, so let's deal with the first one. How do karmas obstruct the perfections of the soul? Exactly. Yeah. So first, how is the obstruction to the soul? So first and foremost, we see it is like a veil, right? Or a covering. So what do we call karma as here in Jainism? We have spoken of them as particles, right? Okay, or matter that attach itself to the soul. Now, what is obstructed? What are the natural perfections of the soul? Okay, so you have infinite knowledge, then go through. It is somewhere you would have written. No, that is how you can reach to that. What are the perfections? So, when we speak, what are the potentialities of the soul? You have infinite knowledge, then power, good, consciousness, happiness. So, we have seen that this karma tends to cloud the soul, or in the sense it tends to cover it and doesn't allow it to realize its full potentials. Now, when we speak about the two kinds of bondage, what are the two bondages that we saw? So, we spoke about internal and material bondage. What is internal bondage here? So, within the soul, and these are the negative dispositions or negative thoughts, feelings, emotions, etc. So, material bondage, on the other hand, is as a result of the soul and its physical association with matter. Okay, and as we have seen, by removing these attachments, you can move towards liberation. And the last one is a bit interesting. Why do you think that Jains meditate and worship liberated souls? And how does this practice influence their spiritual disciplines? Okay, this is somehow related to the first one that we have done. So, why do you think? Okay, so first we know is guidance, inspiration. So we have answered, why do they meditate and worship liberated souls? Now let's say why or how does this practice influence their discipline? Okay, so reflect on this, think about this, and sometime later we'll come back to this. So thank you.